I never expected the conversation to unfold the way it did. It started as a simple request, nothing dramatic, nothing unreasonable. I wasn't asking for money to party, splurge, or buy the latest gadget. I only needed a small, short-term loan to cover an unexpected expense, a car repair that had to be done immediately if I wanted to keep getting to work on time. But before I could even finish explaining, my mom snapped the words that would replay in my mind for days: "We're not your bank anymore." Her tone was sharp, almost rehearsed, as if she had been waiting for an opportunity to say it. My dad sat beside her, arms crossed, silently supporting her statement. I stood there, confused, not because I felt entitled to their help, but because it felt like a sudden shift, as if overnight, I had been pushed from being their child into being a burden they wanted to distance themselves from. I had always tried to handle things myself. I'd paid my own bills, worked extra hours when needed, and never expected rescue. This one request wasn't a habit but an exception. Still, the reply hit deeper than I expected. For a moment, I couldn't speak. I tried to swallow the tightness forming in my chest. "I wasn't treating you like a bank," I finally said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I just needed help this one time." Mom only shrugged. "Well, you're an adult now. You should figure these things out on your own. We're done being responsible for you." The words were brutal, but what hurt more was the coldness behind them. There was no understanding, no willingness to listen, no compassion for the fact that sometimes even adults need help. What they didn't know was that I had already been dealing with more than I could comfortably manage. My hours at work had been cut. My rent had gone up. I'd been trying to budget every penny, skipping outings, eating simple meals, doing everything to stay afloat. I wasn't careless, I was exhausted. And instead of support, I got a lecture disguised as tough love. That night, alone in my apartment, I replayed the conversation again and again. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. I had spent years feeling guilty for even the smallest requests, feeling like a burden for needing anything at all. My parents had always used money as a way to assert control, a way to remind me I wasn't quite independent, not in their eyes. But now, when I actually did need them, they slammed the door in my face. Something inside me shifted. Maybe it was the accumulation of years of being made to feel small, or maybe it was simply the realization that if they saw me as someone who constantly needed them, then they had never truly seen how hard I had worked to stand on my own. Either way, I decided I would show them, not with anger, not with dramatic declarations, but with quiet, unwavering action. I took on extra shifts, even the ones no one wanted. I sold a few things I no longer needed. I tightened my budget even more. It wasn't easy, but slowly, I managed to rebuild my savings. Every time I felt like giving up, I would hear my mother's voice again: "We're not your bank anymore." Instead of hurting me, those words became fuel. I didn't want to prove them wrong out of spite. I wanted to prove to myself that I could do this without relying on people who made me feel worthless for asking. Months passed. My situation improved. I repaired my car, caught up on bills, and eventually received a promotion I had been working toward for almost 2 years. With that promotion came a sense of stability I hadn't felt in a long time. For the first time in years, I felt genuinely proud of myself. My parents, however, didn't know any of this. Communication had become minimal, partly because they didn't reach out and partly because I no longer felt obligated to fill them in. Whenever we did talk, conversations stayed shallow. They never asked how I was managing or if things had improved. They acted as if cutting off support also meant cutting off interest. It wasn't until a family gathering months later that things changed. When I arrived, driving the same car they assumed I couldn't afford to repair, my dad raised an eyebrow. "You got it fixed?" he asked casually. "Yeah," I replied. "I handled it." There was a pause, the kind that carries more weight than the words spoken. My mom was watching me too, as if trying to piece together a puzzle she thought she already knew. I didn't offer details. I didn't need validation. Their surprise was enough. Throughout the evening, I heard them whispering quietly, wondering how I had managed everything without coming to them again. And for the first time, I felt something I hadn't felt before: not anger, not resentment, but clarity. I realized I didn't need their approval or financial safety net. I had built my own. Later, as I was leaving, my mom stopped me. "You've been doing okay?" she asked, softer than before. "I've been doing great," I replied, honestly. She nodded slowly, almost regretfully. But I didn't linger. I didn't need more. I had already learned the strongest lesson. Independence isn't just about money, it's about knowing your worth even when others try to diminish it. And without ever shouting or proving anything loudly, I had shown them exactly what they claimed they wanted to see. I never needed their bank, or their permission, ever again. When my mom told me, "We're not your bank anymore," something inside me quietly broke. It wasn't just the words, it was the way she said them, sharp and proud, as though she had been waiting for a moment to declare her independence from me, even though I had never demanded anything from her in the first place. I walked away from that conversation feeling smaller than I had in years, but also strangely clearer. If they wanted distance, I would give them distance. If they wanted me to handle life completely alone, then I would do that, without inviting them back in. For the first time, I began setting boundaries, silently and firmly. I stopped visiting on weekends out of obligation. I stopped calling just to fill the silence. I stopped sharing anything about my finances, struggles, or progress, because I understood now that every piece of vulnerability was something they used to make me feel less than them. I wasn't angry in a dramatic way, I was simply tired of being treated like a walking responsibility instead of a grown adult. The first few weeks of this new distance felt strangely peaceful. My home felt less heavy. My days felt quieter but calmer. I focused on myself, worked harder, cut unnecessary expenses, and rebuilt my routine. Without the pressure of proving anything to my parents, I found it easier to move forward. I didn't realize how much of my life had been shaped by their constant disapproval until I finally stopped seeking their validation altogether. Then one afternoon, my phone lit up with my mother's name. I stared at the screen for a long moment, wondering if I should even pick up. Eventually, I let it ring and go to voicemail. A few minutes later, she tried again. Then my dad texted, "Call us back. It's important." I took a deep breath and ignored that too. If it was truly important, they would explain. The next day, my sister called. "Mom's freaking out," she said. "Call her. She can text if it's that urgent," I replied calmly. My sister paused. "She won't. You know how she is." And that was exactly the problem. My parents had spent years expecting everyone to cater to their communication style. They demanded respect they didn't give. They expected immediate obedience even when they offered nothing in return. I wasn't playing that game anymore. Hours passed before I finally listened to the voicemail. My mom's voice sounded tense, almost rehearsed. "Call me back when you get this. We need to talk." No apology, no warmth, just expectation. 2 days later, after leaving them on read long enough to reclaim some of my own space, I got the message that revealed everything: "We're having some financial issues." Call us. Financial issues. The irony nearly made me laugh. Months earlier, they had thrown the words, "We're not your bank," at me like a slap. Now, suddenly, they wanted access to mine. I finally called back, prepared, steady, and calm. My mom answered immediately, sounding both relieved and irritated. "Why didn't you pick up earlier?" she demanded. "I've been busy," I said, neither apologizing nor explaining further. She sighed dramatically. "Well, your father and I could use a little help. Just until things settle." I didn't respond right away. I wanted to hear how far they would go. "We helped you so much when you were younger," she continued. "It's only fair that you help us now." "Helped me," I repeated softly. "You mean the times you reminded me constantly that I was a burden? The times you made me feel guilty for every small thing I needed? The times you used money as a way to control my decisions, even when I didn't ask for it?" She went quiet. My dad cleared his throat in the background. "We're family," he said. "Family supports each other." I almost smiled at the hypocrisy. "You're right," I said. "Family supports each other. But support goes both ways. You don't get to refuse me when I needed help and then expect me to jump when you snap your fingers." My mom's voice rose. "So you're going to punish us? Is that it?" "No," I said simply. "I'm choosing peace. I've been doing everything on my own. Just like you wanted. We didn't mean it like that, she tried, suddenly softer. We were stressed. You know how things were. So was I said. But I didn't use that as an excuse to hurt you. Another long silence followed, the kind filled with all the realizations they didn't want to admit. My dad was the first to speak again, his voice low, almost defeated. We could really use your help, kid. I felt a small sting in my chest. Part of me wanted to help, because despite everything, I wasn't heartless. But the larger part of me remembered how it felt when I was the one needing just a little support, and they shut me down with a cruel sentence. I hope things work out for you, I said steadily. But I can't be your bank. The silence that followed was heavier than anything before. For the first time, they felt what I had felt, the deep sting of a door gently closing. I wasn't cruel. I wasn't vengeful. I was simply done giving people access to me when all they ever did was take. And this time, when I hung up, the peace that settled over me didn't feel like distance, it felt like freedom. I never imagined a simple argument over money could unravel years of family dynamics in a single afternoon. It began innocently enough, with me asking for a little help to cover an unexpected expense. I had no grand expectations, just a small favor. But when my mom snapped, "We're not your bank anymore," it hit harder than I could have imagined. It wasn't just a refusal, it was a statement that, in their eyes, my independence had finally become a burden. Their words didn't just cut, they echoed every moment I had felt unappreciated, every small injustice I had quietly swallowed over the years. At first, I felt shocked, then hurt, and finally, a quiet anger that didn't shout but simmered beneath the surface. It wasn't the money I was after, it was the acknowledgement that sometimes, life throws curveballs, and even adults need help. But the message was clear, in my parents' eyes, I had crossed some invisible line. I was no longer their child needing guidance, I was simply an adult they didn't want to invest in emotionally or financially. That clarity, though painful, sparked something else, a determination to reclaim control of my life. I decided immediately that nothing would feel the same again. I wouldn't beg, I wouldn't justify, and I certainly wouldn't plead for understanding that wouldn't come. Instead, I turned inward, focusing on solutions I could manage alone. I took on extra shifts at work, cutting down on personal time and sleep to make up for the financial shortfall. I sold things I no longer needed, pared down my expenses, and became hyper-aware of every dollar spent. It wasn't glamorous or fun, it was exhausting, but it gave me an unexpected sense of empowerment. For the first time, I realized that independence isn't just about money, it's about proving to yourself that you can survive even when support disappears. Weeks turned into months, and slowly, the picture changed. My car was repaired, bills were paid on time, and I started building a modest savings again. Every achievement, no matter how small, carried weight. My parents were no longer a constant presence reminding me of my dependence, instead, the silence allowed me to recognize how much I had accomplished alone. I didn't boast about it. I didn't need to. The real triumph was internal. I had learned to trust my own ability, and that trust felt stronger than any financial cushion my parents had ever offered. Then, one evening, a twist I hadn't anticipated happened. I received a call from my mother, her voice unusually tense. "We need to talk," she said. The urgency in her tone caught my attention, but I was careful not to react with old patterns of anxiety or guilt. I waited, measured, prepared for whatever was coming. It wasn't until she explained the situation that I realized how the tables had turned. My parents, who had once declared they were done being my bank, suddenly needed financial assistance. They were facing difficulties I hadn't been aware of, and now, their pride was at risk of showing vulnerability. I paused, listening carefully. There was no apology, no acknowledgement of the previous hurtful words, just a request for help cloaked in expectation. For a brief moment, I considered helping, out of habit or instinct. But the memory of their earlier dismissal, the sharpness in my mom's tone, the coldness of their decision, held me back. This was my moment to respond not with emotion, but with clarity. I could choose to repeat the cycle or break it entirely. I explained calmly, without raising my voice, that I had learned to manage my life independently. I reminded them of the times I had needed support and received rejection instead of understanding. I spoke honestly about the lessons I had learned, that independence is earned, and that relying on others without reciprocity only leads to disappointment. They listened, though uneasily, realizing that the dynamic they had maintained for years had shifted. They could no longer assume I would drop everything to solve their problems. The conversation ended with no dramatic reconciliation, no sudden forgiveness, but with a profound sense of balance restored. I wasn't punishing them. I wasn't denying compassion. I was simply choosing boundaries, something I had long avoided in the name of family loyalty. That moment marked a turning point. I realized my own worth, and I understood that respect, trust, and help must flow both ways to be genuine. If I gave endlessly without receiving acknowledgement or fairness, it wasn't support, it was depletion. That understanding became my guiding principle. In the weeks that followed, life continued with a subtle but noticeable shift. My parents were still my parents, but I was no longer their dependent. I handled challenges alone, celebrated successes without needing approval, and faced setbacks with resilience. When they reached out again, I responded with measured kindness, not obligation. They were learning, perhaps slowly, that I had grown beyond the need for financial or emotional rescue. I, in turn, had grown into someone who understood that independence and self-respect are inseparable, and that true strength often comes from handling life's challenges without relying on those who have not consistently been there for you. By the end of that year, I realized something profound. The moment my mom said, "We're not your bank anymore," had been painful, yes, but also transformative. It forced me to step fully into my own life, to trust my judgment, and to recognize that while family matters, my personal sovereignty matters more. I had learned the value of self-reliance, the necessity of boundaries, and the quiet, steady power of handling your own life. And in that realization, I found peace, freedom from dependency, freedom from expectation, and freedom from the invisible chains of past hurts.